what should leftists be doing to work towards arming yourself for self-defense? Arming yourself. What do you mean? You don't work towards arming yourself. You simply arm yourself.
Okay, I'm a dedicated Vaush grazer, but I spit out my coffee on this statement. In the moment, what he says is completely factual. And that isn't my beef. Rather, it's the idea of grabbing a gun doesn't mean you're able to use it as intended. My reasons come not least from this book. Possessing a firearm and ammo, one is indeed armed, but only in the same sense an individual is a cyclist if they own a bike, regardless of any riding proficiency. It is in addition to the circumstantial limits of firing on an assailant. The impetus to pocket a Glock and a handful of bullets and become an army of one is comforting, but I don't think it's complete. Beyond this, one of the early takeaways in on killing is most people have large inhibitions to ending the life of another. In World War I and World War II, bean counters determined more bullets went over the head of an enemy than hit them. This is in spite of successful training to hit a target at range. Suffice it to say, the military spent considerable effort finding methods to train boys to shoot and actually kill. What all this means for you and me is that wielding a weapon and even the ability to hit a paper target at range doesn't mean we can make effective use of it. Not in the face of political violence, particularly hate crimes or an assailant bent on murder-suicide. A firearm as intimidation isn't relevant. Being able to kill or disable the assailant is. Beyond this broad outline, and in contrast to Vaush, is Beau of the fifth column as he gives advice to a woman who has decided to arm herself against political violence. Here I have pulled out highlights from his 30-minute reply to her to capture the contrast.
I'm going to go ahead and warn everybody else now that this is going to be a long video and it's going to be a dark video. The questions seem very sincere, and so we're just going to go with it from there. This may not be a topic a lot of people are comfortable with. So the message, Beau, because of what happened at the synagogue, I've decided to purchase a gun. I've gotten advice from my friends, and they have told me to buy either a revolver or a shotgun. So a revolver doesn't have a safety. Now, you didn't put it in your message, but let me tell you what you probably heard. So you want to get a revolver because it doesn't jam. It's very easy to use, and it's point and shoot. See, those sound like great qualities. But the subtext of that is, A, you don't have to train because it's easy to use and it's point and shoot. You will train because if you're going to purchase a firearm, you need to. You need to really understand what you're dealing with. Shotgun. You probably heard something like, see, when you rack that shotgun, the intruder will hear that and run away. Maybe. Maybe. An attempt to scare them, you've given away your position. That's not what you want to do. A shotgun, a firearm of any kind, is not meant to scare somebody. It is meant to kill somebody. If you are not comfortable with that, do not purchase a firearm.
There's one subtext here. The people that you might ask for advice will all have a lot of opinions. Caveat emptor. And be careful who you choose to trust, especially in the face of a lack of firearm literacy on your own.
So, how should a woman choose a firearm? Same way a man should. They all have different roles, right? All have different purposes, designed with something specific in mind. Firearms are the same way. They are the same way. Each one is designed with a specific purpose in mind. Your purpose, based on what you've said, is to kill a person. That's what you're worried about. That's why you're getting it. You're worried about political violence. And I feel for you. I do. I don't think you're crazy. I wish you were. I wish the honest advice I could give you would be that you don't need one. You know, good for you. You're concerned and you're willing to accept responsibility for your own safety. That's the reason I'm making this video. So, then what?
If at some point you feel queasy or daunted, get in line. I felt very much the same way. Many committing political violence or who are intent on murder-suicide are not expecting to survive. They come heavily armed, and they may even wear body armor.
Now, some gun stores will allow you to take a rent one and go to the range that they have there, buy the ammo there, and shoot it. I'm being a little bit presumptuous here based on your last name and the reason you want this. There's probably somebody in your circle or at your religious institution that is, well, let's just say he might say never again a lot. Without getting too far into it, a weapon is an extension of yourself. You need to find one that fits you. You're not going to be able to pick one by reading about them. You're going to have to shoot them. And that guy, and I assure you he exists, that guy probably see it as his duty to help you in this regard. So once you have decided on your firearm and you've purchased it, you're never going to go back to one of those ranges like that again. You're never going to go back to a range that says you can fire one shot every 2 seconds. You must be standing there like this. You're not going to do that because you're going to train like you fight. You're going to train to kill, not poke holes in paper. If you're going to buy a firearm for the purposes that you've kind of expressed, you need to be prepared to kill. That's what you're saying. So, you're going to train. You're going to learn how to maintain that weapon. You're going to take it apart, put it back together. You're going to clean it. You're going to learn about it. Otherwise, don't get one. You're going to learn how to shoot safely. And then, once you've established all of that, then you're going to really start training. When you go to shoot, don't take silhouettes. Take paper plates. You're going to shoot at paper plates because a silhouette, it's got the score on it, right? And it looks like a person. It causes people to kind of succumb to the close enough syndrome. Well, I got one round here, one round here, one round over here. Well, that'll put somebody down. No. If you're doing this, you're going to fight for your life. It'll probably work, isn't good enough. So you're going to get a paper plate because that's about the size of the kill area on a human chest and about the size of a human head. And when you can put a magazine into that, you're on the right track. So now we've covered the basics of training, and there's a lot more to it. And as you start shooting, you'll pick up more. You'll pick up more little things that you're going to want to do and learn how to do, and that's part of it. Purchasing a firearm, going to the range once and throwing it in a box is one thing. Actually learning how to fight and be prepared for the type of political violence you're talking about is something entirely different. It's a journey. It's not an event. So then the question becomes, how do you win a firefight? You need 3 things. You need speed, surprise, and violence of action. Speed, you're going to get through your training. You're going to be able to do everything you need to do. Change magazines, you're going to practice that. You're going to practice pulling it out. You're going to practice all of this, and you're going to get quick. And then on a higher level than that, once you've decided to act, you make the decision, you're going to act, you're going to engage. At that point, you got to do it quickly. Surprise, exactly what it sounds like. On TV, I got a gun, freeze. No. And not unless you're required to by the laws in your area. You don't do that. There's no reason to. When you're talking about somebody walking into a synagogue, and that's the type of person you're worried about engaging, don't play fair. Play as dirty as you are legally allowed to. If you can shoot him in the back, do it. This type of thing, you're talking about combat. There's no honor in combat. There's no playing fair. You win or you die. And violence of action. Violence of action is the last thing. And that means that once you have engaged, you bring down as much firepower onto that poor SOB as you can, as quickly as you can. You shock him. You make it to where it's just terrifying for the last few minutes of his existence. Seconds, hopefully. Pretty dark, right? That's the reality. That is the reality of what you're talking about. You know, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing it. I think it's a good thing. If you want to prepare and you want to protect yourself and you're going to accept that responsibility, it is fantastic. It's great. But you can't go into it blind. Other than that, I mean, I wish you luck. I wish you luck. I really wish we didn't live in a world where a woman who appears to be in her early 20s is worried about getting gunned down while she's worshiping. But it's the world we live in. You're worried about political violence, and it's on the rise. So I really do wish I could give you different advice. I wish I could say, you don't need to do this. I really do, but I can't. The best advice I can give you is to, you've made the decision. Do it right. Do it right. Learn the weapon. Never forget that it is to kill.
He makes it plain that he is talking about combat preparation, the sort of thing a militia, the military, police, or National Guard undertake, and tough stuff to go it alone. On a different level, this is exactly what well-regulated meant at the time of writing the Second Amendment. The expectation was all adult white men were obligated to serve in militia, with the intent that they were to be trained and disciplined on or near par to a professional soldier. The prevailing view in that era was standing armies are treacherous, and that a state-controlled yeoman militia would defend against and be immune to such treachery. Debate on this topic can be found in the Federalist Papers. So where am I going with all this? First is to fill out why I nearly spit out my morning coffee. And add to that, it is amazing that individuals have to contemplate defending themselves or their community solo. Political violence is on the rise. What is the correct response to this? Police at every corner? Or in every school? Or are we even sure after Uvalde? One other is that to expect the second to actually have value, the general population needs basic combat literacy. So I ask you to consider this. What if everyone had that combat literacy? Everyone would have this training around 18, along with de-escalation training as a rite of passage, even as part of universal national service. I find the concept in part terrifying, not least because we must cope with gangs and right-wing militia already. Knowledge can be dangerous. Yet imagine every adult, from the ghetto to the toniest areas to a rural county to the burbs, undergoing this, having practical experience, working as a unit drawn from all walks of life, and everyone knows how to do the same thing. Universal, no exceptions, comes with the high school diploma. There is one additional aspect to having everyone trained in the use of firearms and basic training in combat is as a test for the right wing. Will they actually countenance every walk of life being prepared and indeed proficient to some degree at a very basic level to being able to fight for what they believe is their rights. Will the Second Amendment types agree to this, or will they suddenly find reason, as there was in the past, to deny gun rights to other Americans? Resistance to a draft is in part a child of the 60s. The draft was ended not only as a repudiation of the Vietnam War, but also to its unfairness. The rich could buy their way out of the draft and lobby for police action, and ordinary boys suffered what they must. But the end of the draft broke a communal sense of the sacrifice of war. Draftees were all too aware who paid the price. The other reality is that we are ill-served by leaving our national defense or service to volunteers, of whom many do so to get access to higher ed. This is not to speak ill of those who do join. Rather, it is to the rest of us who never will, and the perversity of indentured servitude simply to afford higher education and outsource our common defense to the least well-off. Furthermore, there's no reason to be limited to military service. There could also be a WPA. It would provide jobs and job training and the rationale for universal debt-free college and medical care. If everyone is a vet, well, the right should not object. Support our troops. Make it a drop-in jobs program, covering everything from making your neighborhood nicer to defending God and country. Note, more than a few nations have universal conscription. Switzerland, North Korea, Israel, and more. In the UK, even the royal men serve. So I tend to think the concrete experience from different walks of life working as a group is influential in 10 years, and it is something of a prophylactic against an almost lethal division and isolation. And given everything going on politically and environmentally, we may actually need it. So now I'm going to go back to my morning coffee and channel grazing. Cheers.
Republicans have said the quiet part out loud after President Joe Biden canceled some small amount of student loan debt. In fact, you had 19 Republican members of the House of Representatives last week signing a letter to Biden expressing some concern. Oh, there's concern over some of the unintended consequences of the president's plan to cancel about $10,000 to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for borrowers in lower to upper middle income families. Now, the letter counts the GI Bill, which covers all in-state tuition and fees at public colleges and universities, as, quote, some of the most successful recruiting incentives for the U.S. military and a driving factor in many individuals' decisions to join the armed forces. Oh, and said that by forgiving such a wide swath of loans for borrowers, you are removing any leverage the Department of Defense maintained as one of the fastest and easiest ways of paying for higher education. Oh my God, they admit it.
You know, you have the guns, so you don't. Get to know your neighbors as well.